it is so difficult to follow Prof. Chew. You can sense the excitement, when he explains what he's doing. Anyway, I've been asked to talk about impact investment, especially how it relates to sustainability. And the space of recovering is agri-food space, because that's the space I know best. I've been working on food security issues for the last 3 decades, perhaps. I started my career at the International Rice Research Institute, Wageningen, and so on and so forth. Anyway, how much time do I have? Because we're running out of time. I can't have another meeting. That's my problem. Sorry. Okay. Let's step back and ask the question why. Why should we be concerned about agriculture and food, right? Now, some of the articles that my group and I have written this last year, I think really highlights some of the important points. Okay? The fact that, we're so dependent on imports from elsewhere. I think we all heard about the Ukraine-Russia war, fertilizer shortage, wheat price, and so on and so forth. But more fundamentally, our change in eating habits is also affecting, right, our production capabilities. The fact that we're eating more and more meat now, more and more fish, and we don't have enough soybeans at all to grow those fish and animals. In one of our papers, we estimated that right now, wheat, for example, if Korea is an example, the Koreans are eating half as much rice as they used to. So they're eating a lot more wheat, And in the ASEAN region, there's only one country that produces wheat. So we import 270 times more than what we grow. So ratio is 270 to 1. Soybeans is 10 to 1. Okay? So we need to do something to reduce our vulnerabilities, and perhaps the speed breeding that Prof. Chew talked about actually could be one way. And also the way to convert temperate crops into tropical crops. Okay? And in very technical terms, you convert C3 to C4 plants. You can also do that. That's a beautiful part of what science allows us to do, actually. I need to move quickly. So why now? Prof. Chew also mentioned nutrition. Nutrition security has become a very big issue, okay, around the world. It's not just having enough food, but making sure, the triple burden of malnutrition, right? Over, under, and mineral nutrition deficiencies. A lot of us are probably quite healthy, except for a few important minerals that we don't have, yeah? And all the symptoms that we've seen this last year, price hikes and so on and so forth, yeah? But there's been a new concern now, which I didn't quite touch on, but I need to touch on, because I'm very heavily invested in that now. Agriculture not just suffers from climate change, but agriculture also affects climate. Okay? And there's been a big reversal in thinking. Rice. I'm sure we all eat rice, right? Now in Southeast Asia, rice is the biggest emitter of methane, in fact, greenhouse gases. And you cannot solve the climate change issue in Southeast Asia without addressing rice, okay? Especially without reducing methane. And if you're interested, my group and I have done quite a few papers on this. I'm also involved in a company right now that's trying to decarbonize rice, okay, funded by the Gates Foundation, because we know that unless you have a drastic transformation of your rice cultivation, you're not going to change things at all. And this big cultivation is to move away from whole time flooded rice into dry rice, intermittent dry rice, something they call alternate wet and drying, yeah? Move on. So there's a new concern. But we know that there are many challenges, and I won't spend time on this. In fact, Dr. Ravi actually touched on a few of these. A lack of time, we just flip through very fast. What is interesting is that all these challenges are now providing opportunities for investment. So I actually like, I think what Prof. Chew said just now, through problems you have opportunities, right? The classical Chinese kind of thing, So these are just some opportunities for investors who are keen to help us assure agriculture is sustained and that food is available to all of us. Right? Food for all, basically. Yeah? And these are just some areas, very quickly, biotechnology that we've heard quite a bit about, farm management, or the whole gamut from upstream, midstream to downstream. Okay? All possible innovations that really can help us secure food. And if you look at the trends are quite amazing. I'm actually quite a late comer to this whole scene because Prof. Chew, I was a scientist for many, many years. Okay, but then I figured, hey, if you really want to make change, the private sector is where the changes are the fastest. You look at mobile phones. Governments don't produce mobile phones. You look at computers, right? Those are all innovations driven by the private sector. Now, we're now seeing that trend happening in agriculture and food. Okay? It's an amazing trend. But because of COVID, 2021, there was $53 billion invested by the private sector in what we generally call AgTech, FinTech, okay, and also food tech more recently. Yeah? And this year, in fact, it's jumped up again. And what is interesting is that Singapore is now turning out to be quite a focus for many venture companies to come here, also for startup companies. I know some of us attended like the SIAW, Singapore Singapore International Agri-Food Week, and you just see the number of people coming here to Singapore to learn from us, but also sharing what they have. Okay? So lots of opportunities indeed, yeah? So this is from AgFunder, one of the biggest investment companies worldwide, private sector. Now, what I want to share with you is this, going forward, where are some areas that we think we can play, basically, in terms of investment? Huh? I tend to divide technologies, especially agri-food technologies, into two categories: the complementary and the disruptive. Okay? Complementary technologies include things like hybrid seed, tissue culture, which are all, in a sense, passé now. Okay? They complement what we've been doing in the past, like conventional breeding. You can actually augment it a little bit, with some of the new techniques, even mushroom culture, stuff like that. And if you're interested, advertise a bit my old book, 2008. In fact, I discuss all the technologies in there. Okay? Now, we're now getting to the era now where we're looking at game changers. Okay? And the last International Rice Congress, just as an example, that happened about 4 weeks ago in Manila, there was so much talk about the importance of transforming food systems, transforming agricultural systems. The world basically is at a turning point. Okay, we have lots of issues, unless you have disruptive technologies, and by definition, a disruptive technology is one that displaces an established technology or shakes up the industry totally, create an entirely new industry. And quite frankly, I was excited when I listened to Prof. Chia, because the kind of stuff that he's doing has the potential to be disruptive, very disruptive indeed, by shortening growing periods and so on and so forth. So disruptive technologies is one area where I think we want to look at for a small country like Singapore. Now, we also know that historically, agriculture has really depended on innovations to take the big leaps. The one that we used to study in school, Mendel's laws, right? The Gregorian monk, and his laws, in fact, were lost for many, many decades and rediscovered. Right? That, in fact, was the basis of modern plant breeding. Without the rediscovery of Mendel's laws, we wouldn't have had hybrid corn in North America. And hybrid corn is what gives us all the animal feed now to grow the animals that we need. Just as one example of that. So science, disruptive science is also very important. Now, in today's world, I kind of think that there are at least 7 disruptive technologies that are worth investing in. Okay, both in science, technology, and financially. Okay? Digital technology. Now, agriculture is the least digitized of all the sectors, unlike the airline sector, banking, and so on, So a lot of opportunities, in fact, and even the ASEAN ministers of agriculture have recognized that. Okay? They have now established a set of guidelines on how to digitalize agriculture itself. Yeah? And then biotechnology, again, I think we've heard enough from Prof. Chiu on biotech. And biotech is not just about, let's say, gene editing and so on. In fact, something that we've tended to avoid is genetic modification or GMOs. GMOs have actually proven to be very beneficial in those countries that are net exporters of food. If you ask yourself, who are the major exporters of corn and soybeans? They're all GM crop growing, the Americas. And without that corn and soybean, here in Asia, we will not be eating the chicken they want to eat, or the fish, right? Asia imports 70% of the world's soybeans. That's how much we're dependent. So the question is, what do we do? Okay, can we, in fact, be a bit more self-sufficient in the Asian region, right? By breeding varieties of soybean that actually tolerate our tropical conditions much more, especially heat spikes. The heat spikes are really killing, not just for soybean, but also for rice itself. Yeah? Then, novel foods. Yeah, again, Singapore wants to be a leader. Yeah, it's purposely said wants to be a leader in novel food. Cultured meat, and so on and so forth. Huh? But it's quite a way to go yet. Okay? And then, of course, novel environments, which is a very big thing, indoor farms, high-tech farms, tiered farms, and so on, that kind of thing. It's, and then, of course, beyond that, things like technologies like, product integrity, blockchain, and so on, waste valorization. I think all of you have heard of Black Soldier Fly, right? In fact, it's a reality now. Some of the world's biggest companies, are invested in Black Soldier Fly. And what is interesting too is that there are companies that are Singapore-based, but are growing them in Malaysia because it's a lot cheaper to build and to maintain those Black Soldier Flies. And then, of course, also supply chain logistics and so on, actually. So it's very fast. Just a quick snapshot, because she tells me I only got 5 minutes left. digital technology, precision farming, IoT systems, stuff like that. You can see where, I think the analogy that Tim used is a very good one. In the past, we've got so many computer scientists, engineers focused not on agriculture, but on other sectors. Now, just imagine if we can bring to bear, all the expertise, creativity in agriculture, we actually make a lot of advances. And I remember Heng Swee Keat saying once at one of the SAW dinners, that it's not the Singapore market that we want to produce technologies for. It's the world. Okay, but Singapore wants to be a leader, wants to take out the IP, so that our market is a global market, not just the Singapore market, because Singapore market is tiny for anything itself. So digitalization is actually a big opportunity. And we're just starting to scratch the surface, quite frankly. In fact, I'm finishing a study for the ASEAN Secretariat on this, assessing the state of digital technologies in agriculture in Southeast Asia. Because the Japanese are very keen to invest here, India is keen, so is China, in fact, investing in Southeast Asia to improve our digitalization. So all these are examples, that you can skim through. And by the way, I'll be happy to share my slides with you, if you're interested, because I can't expect you to absorb everything. Biotechnology, I started with GM crops, moving to gene editing, and then, of course, now gene editing with, induced gene silencing. There's a whole lot of gene editing plus technologies available now. This, non-browning potato, non-browning apple, and now we have the non-browning banana. They're all available. And just to declare, I advise one of these companies based in the UK that has produced the first non-browning banana. You imagine how easy when you cut your banana, right? You leave it around, it actually really browns. But they've actually done that through a gene editing technique. So all this will not just produce more, but importantly help to reduce waste. Okay, because in Asia, we usually share our fruits. I like in the Americas, right? Everybody eats, an apple. Here we tend to cut into pieces, right? And we actually waste a lot because once it turns brown, nobody really wants to eat it. Yeah? So biotech is the other big area where a lot of opportunities, and we see a lot of startup companies using biotechnologies very broadly, to do different things in the agri-food landscape. Then novel food. Again, Singapore likes to pride itself with the first country to approve cultured chicken, but we actually still haven't commercially produced any yet. Neither have we produced any fish or shrimp yet. But it's coming. Akan datang really, it's a story really. But we do have some pioneering companies that have been recognized, like Turtle Tree, that's producing milk, in big fermenters, but not selling the milk, extracting valuable ingredients from the milk, which are very expensive. And that's, in fact, a good lesson to learn, actually, about value addition, right? 3 minutes left. Okay, fast. So insects, cultured meat, microbial protein, and so on. That's another area that, we're doing a lot on in Singapore, but also in the region. I was just attending the National Biotech Symposium in Malaysia last week, and it's amazing what's happening in Malaysia. Okay, land is cheap, labor is cheap, and they've got a lot of very well-trained people. Like Monash University offers a bachelor's degree in biotechnology, just one example, and so on and so forth. So a lot is happening in this region. But what it means is that there's a lot of research going on in public institutions, but not enough getting to the marketplace. Okay, so while there's good R&D going on, there's very little commercialization going on, which is where I think, people like yourself, some of you actually, can really play a big role. Then the other big area of technology is novel environments. Not novel environments. Like this thing, the one I like to exemplify is growing rice in the sea. There's a group of students, in fact, from the UK that discovered the halophytic rice, okay, and they're testing in the ocean. And the advantage of this is that if you grow rice in the ocean, there's no methane emitted at all. So companies like Shell are also interested because they need to offset their carbon credits. Okay? So there's all these kind of opportunities. Of course, we're all familiar with indoor farms and so on. So I won't touch on those, yeah? And then waste valorization, black soldier fly is the best example. But we also have some interesting companies in Singapore, like one that is converting recycled bread into beer and vegetables into fruit juices. Okay? Now that's a good example of basically not just recycling, but actually upcycling your waste products. Yeah? I think I need to move on very fast, I think. So impact investing. Okay, impact investing. So I'm okay with time? Okay, thank you. Okay. No, I need to listen to the organizers. Okay? They're the bosses. All right? Okay. So impact investing, where does this come in? Until recently, impact investing really wasn't that popular a term. It is now. Because why? basically because of all the issues we are facing in the world, environment, climate change. So a lot of, in fact, I spoke to another group of family officers not too recently, and he said, look, we want to make a difference. And in fact, Bill Gates started the trend. Right, Bill Gates, developed has a lot of subsidiaries. One of them is BEV, Break-Even Energy Ventures, that I'm actually involved in. And so when we invest, we want to make a difference. So impact investing basically is investments with the intention to create positive, measurable social and environmental impact, aside from the financial gain, because all companies need to make financial gain, otherwise you can't survive, right, as a company. So if you look at some of the technologies that are available now, and in the context of ESG, which I don't like, I prefer EES, okay? Because ESG is really for the big guys. Okay? EES is more for the small guys. Okay? Because the governance issue, you can tackle that very easily. Anyway, things like having sensors to increase nutrient use efficiency, pest management, those are all tools, technologies that can help you address the economic rubric, make it more financially profitable to farm. Now, of course, the environment rubric, climate mitigation is one big thing now. Right? How do we contribute when we grow food towards reducing the impact of agriculture on the climate? And I mentioned methane just now, but other technologies like biochar, alternate wetting, drying in rice, methane reduction in bovines. I guess you all know that cows, cattle are one of the biggest emitters of methane. So there are some people now in New Zealand that they are feeding seaweed to reduce the methane coming out both sides of the cow. Okay? And then, of course, social, fintech systems is just one example. Again, a lot of activities in fintech systems now along the supply chain. So these are some of the kind of reason for why we do impact investing. It's not possible technologies. But to ensure success, now that's where the big challenge is. One common saying is that 90% of startups don't cross the valley of death. Okay, a lot of them fail for many different reasons. And if you haven't heard of this term, the valley of death, it's actually a very nice term. That can be used to illustrate the fact that you got to get your eggs together if you want them to hatch, basically, to become chicken, right? The valley of death is the period in the life of a startup company where it hasn't begun operations, but hasn't started generating yet. So in investment circles, we talk about the burn rate, right? A lot of young companies in Singapore, in fact, they generate enough seed money, even Series A, but their burn rate, in terms of the amount of expenditure per month, is so high, okay, that they don't really see the light of day. They cannot scale up at all, right? So that's what is known as the valley of death, yeah? And one of the roles I play nowadays is to try to advise some of these groups to avoid the valley of death, okay, through either venture funds or other sorts of funding. Family offices, for example, that are more kind of, interested in impact investment. Okay? So, oops, sorry. Oh, never mind, I think it's okay. Now, again, back to assessing impact. The last group of family officers I talked to, but my shareholders are asking me, what is the impact I'm creating? Okay, apart from ROI, right? So what else can you quantify to show, in fact, that, hey, your investing is actually making a difference to what you want to do in impact investment, right? The environment, climate, and so on. So things like, profit for the farmers is a very important social factor. Reduce prices for consumers, and also another very important social factor. And you keep going on, actually. Leveling incomes, keeping farmers on the land, of course, greenhouse gas emissions, the gender issue. I said I didn't like the G part in the ESG, because most big companies tend to abuse the G part. I once published a paper on greenwashing, basically. And the governance rubric is the easiest to greenwash, right? Just put 5 women on your board. And you have basically tackled the governance. Sorry about it sounds sexist, but that's what our companies do. Okay? So anyway, so assessing impact is also very key. Okay, I think I'm going to finish here and just say, look, the issues facing us are so immense and critical. Okay? We need the public and the private sector to work together. In the early days, like the 50s and 60s, most of the money that went into investments in agriculture were public sector. The World Bank, Asian Development Bank, and so on. Today, that's really shifting now, shifting in favor of the private sector. Okay? But net is that the FAO has estimated that what we need today is over $265 billion a year to make sure we still have food by 2050. That's how big the challenge is. Yeah? So with that, I'm going to finish off. Just by mentioning, I do have a book coming out, if you're interested, early next year, called Food Security Issues in Asia. 27 chapters. I've gotten some of the best people to write, like, what's the future of rice? What's the future of fish? What are upcoming technologies? Stuff like that. Okay? I urge you to ask your library to buy a copy. It's a bit expensive because World Scientific is a very expensive publisher. Okay? And then apart from that, I also belong to an investment group called Terraces. And if you want to find out more, just let me know. Okay, we do advisory, we do venture building, okay, linking you up with finances and so on, also impact investing. So with that, I think I've exceeded my time by how many minutes?
So
6 minutes. Okay.
Thank you, Prof. Tang.